Welcome, everybody. Good Shabbat. Welcome to the sacrament of Shabbat. Today, we continue a discussion about the book of Isaiah, part 25 of a series. And I believe we're in chapter 29. So we still have 10 more chapters for just the first part of Isaiah. And then we move into Deutero, or second Isaiah, and Trito Isaiah, which is third Isaiah. So there are three sections of writings attributed to Isaiah in the book of Isaiah. And according to biblical scholarship, only the first part up to chapter 39 is actually written by the man Isaiah. And then Deutero and Trito Isaiah were written after his lifespan had expired by the school of Isaiah, or his disciples, or those that followed his way. So let's look at the chapter for the day, which is chapter 29. So Isaiah once again prophesies against Jerusalem. In Isaiah 29, verses 1 through 4, it says, Ariel, Ariel, the city where David encamped. Add year to year, let the festivals run their round. Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be mourning and lamentation, and Jerusalem shall be to me like an Ariel. And like David, I will encamp against you. I will besiege you with towers and raise siege works against you. Then deep from the earth you shall speak. From low in the dust your words shall come. Your voice shall come from the ground like the voice of a ghost, and your speech shall whisper out of the dust. So Ariel is a name or a reference to Jerusalem. Many cities and places were named different code names by the prophets. I believe Rahab was Egypt, and Ariel, for example, is Jerusalem. What does Ariel mean? I have it down here in the bottom right. Ariel means hearth of God, as translated in Ellicott's commentary for English readers, or altar hearth. The New Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha gives that translation. So what is in a hearth but burning wood, ash, and fire? So essentially, when Isaiah prophesies and is speaking on behalf of Yahweh or God, he's calling Jerusalem Ariel, a hearth full of burning materials, whether that's people or buildings, fire, which is destruction, dissolution, and then of course you have all the ash, which is the dust. So here, again, there's a prophecy that somehow Jerusalem will be destroyed. And of course, this prophecy is still another reiteration of the prophecy that the Babylonian or Assyrian Empire will come down and wipe out the first temple in all of Jerusalem, and the Babylonians will move. There'll be a Babylonian diaspora of Jewish people. The Babylonian conquerors will move and to exile the Jewish people from their homeland lower into the Babylonian Empire. And their city shall be laid to waste, to ash, by fire and destruction that the Assyrian army brings about. And then here, again, it's the same idea that if you're not following the way of Torah, you should know this by now if you've been coming and listening to these classes. Isaiah's perspective is that if you're not following Torah, you're not with God. And you no longer have God's protection. And God would use whole foreign militaries. He would take them over in some mystical divine way and make them come in and slaughter the people of Jerusalem, the Israel people, the Jewish people. So here, the city is being destroyed by the Assyrians in this prophecy of Isaiah, which did happen historically. And it's because the people of Israel, the Jewish people, had turned away from the way of God. They had turned away from Torah. They were no longer obedient. They no longer had fidelity, the commandments found within the Hebrew Testament. So not only would Jerusalem fall and the first temple of Solomon fall into ashes, but many people would die. This last section here Then deep from the earth you shall speak. From low in the dust your words shall come. Deep in the earth refers to Sheol, this divine underworld where all souls, whether good or bad, exist. And they kind of exist like a shadow, like a ghost. And we hear that reflected in the next part of the verse. Your voice shall come from the ground, under the ground, the underworld, Sheol, like the voice of a ghost, because they're like shadows or ghosts separated from God. And your speech shall whisper out of the dust. Your speech shall whisper out of the dust, the ash that is Jerusalem in the first temple. So it's a very bleak prophecy, very dark prophecy from Isaiah. And he's already iterated this so many times in earlier chapters. He's just saying it once more, because perhaps he's speaking to a different crowd. Maybe he speaks to this crowd one Friday, and then he speaks to another crowd another Friday. So he's reiterating things, and this is being written down by him or possibly by a hearer of him. We don't know. So Isaiah prophesies against Jerusalem's enemies next. So Isaiah 29:5, but the multitude of your foes shall be like small dust, and the multitude of tyrants like flying chaff. Isaiah 29:7, and the multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, that is Jerusalem, all that fight against her in her stronghold and who distress her, shall be like a dream, a vision of the night. In other words, ephemeral, that it just goes away. You open your eye, one moment you close your eyes, the next moment you open your eyes and they're all gone. So the same foreign enemies that Isaiah says that God uses to punish those that have turned away from Torah, those Jewish people of Israel that had turned away from Torah, God also promises that they too shall be swept away like dust in the wind, or they shall be as impermanent as waking from a dream. So neither side really seems to win here. Neither God's chosen people, Israel, nor the enemies of Israel, because it seems God's just mad at everybody, right? He's mad at the people of Israel because they're not obedient to him, and he's mad at the foreigners that he purportedly used as an instrument of his wrath, according to the prophet Isaiah. He's mad at them because they attacked his holy people. So I guess everybody just needs to die, right? This is the outlook of Isaiah. This is the outlook of Isaiah. So and again, to be fair to Isaiah, he's living in a time of war, of exiles, of his people and his temple, his way of life being destroyed. He sees war all around him. So he interprets God, Yahweh, as a warrior God. That's what Yahweh is. He's a warrior God. He's a thunder God. He's a God of the sky, right? So we just have to be careful, as I always say, because how you define God is what you give yourself permission to be. So if I say that God is a wrathful God, then that gives me permission to be wrathful against people that don't think like me. If I say God is intolerant, then I'm allowed to be intolerant. If I say that God judges people that aren't following Torah, then that gives me permission to judge people that aren't following Torah. So we have to be very careful. And that is one of the things that I do credit Mar Yeshua, the Master Jesus, for, because according to John in his letters, John, who learned from Jesus, John, the beloved, presumably, says God is love. How you define God is how you give yourself permission to act in the world. So it is far better to define God as love than as wrathful. Because if God is love, then we must be loving. We must reflect God's goodness in the world. And there are two ways that you can come to God. You can come to God out of fear, which is what Isaiah is teaching. It will make some people come to God, but many people that are taught to fear God will reject God. This is true just as much in the time of Isaiah as it is today. Jesus, in a brilliant twist, said, God is love. God is forgiving. God is light. And that is approaching God out of pure love. And I say you'll always catch more bees with honey than you will with some bitter tea or something set out for them, right? So, moving on. Enough said for now. I'll probably repeat myself 10 million more times as we go through all the books of the prophets, because all the prophets essentially say the same thing in different ways. So, until we get to Jesus, who is much different in flavor from the Jewish sages than his early prophetic predecessors. So Isaiah gives a warning to prophets and priests. In the last chapter, it said something similar about all the prophets and priests being drunken and that God was somehow rejecting them. So here, Isaiah 29, 9 through 12, it says, "Stupefy yourselves and be in a stupor. Blind yourselves and be blind. Be drunk, but not from wine. Stagger, but not from strong drink. For the Lord has poured out upon you a spirit of deep sleep. He has closed your eyes, you prophets, and covered your heads, you seers. The vision of all this has become for you like the words of a sealed document. If it is given to those who can read, with the command, read this, they say, we cannot, for it is sealed. And if it is given to those who cannot read, saying, read this, they say, we cannot read." So here, Isaiah is criticizing his fellow prophets and seers. He is saying that they are drunk from alcohol, and that this dulls their wisdom and their effectiveness as being an instrument of God on behalf of the people of Israel. So he says, be drunk, but not from wine, stagger, but not from strong drink. He's saying that you should be drunk with God's divine joy. You should be drunk in the ecstasy of God consciousness. For the Lord has poured out upon you a spirit of deep sleep. He has closed your eyes. So as a punishment for being drunken and not doing their duty in the world, being spiritual teachers and drawing people that have gone away from the way of God, bringing them back, helping them to make teshuvah or make a return to the way of God, they're out there drinking and having fun, which is what a lot of priests and rabbis do nowadays, as well as every other kind of religious leader from every other kind of religion in the world, doing what they shouldn't be doing, right? Not following through on their promises to God. So as a punishment, God has put them into a deep sleep. He's closed their eyes, meaning that they're kind of the blind leading the blind, as Jesus said. And they're in a deep sleep. They're in a coma. In other words, they're unconscious of the way of God. They're not even conscious that they should be doing something for God. So all of their wisdom has been sealed up and sealed tight and shut. Whatever they had, God isn't even allowing them to use as a punishment. So in Isaiah 29, 13 through 14, Isaiah is prophesying on behalf of the Lord. The Lord said, because these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far away from me, and their worship of me is a human commandment learned by rote, so I will again do amazing things with this people, shocking and amazing. So here, it seems that Yahweh, through the instrument of the prophet Isaiah, is criticizing he says these people. So it seems to be, one might think that it's all the Israelites, but I don't think so. I think it links back to what we just covered. I think when Yahweh says these people, he's still referring to these prophets, seers, priests. They draw near with mouths and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far away from me. They don't love me. They're just doing worship in temples and synagogues, simply learned by rote, so they can get a paycheck, or so that they can get human adoration when somebody comes up and gives too much respect to a bishop, a priest, a rabbi, a whoever. So because, according to Isaiah, speaking on behalf of God, Adonai, Yahweh, because these people are only speaking with their lips, but have nothing in their hearts. Their hearts are empty and dry. They're only speaking words by rote, nothing with love. God says, I will take it upon myself to inspire my people with divine actions, as I have done since the time of Noah's Ark until present day. So I guess I'm just going to have to do some amazing things with Israel, shocking and amazing, to wake up their hearts, make them feel the awe of God, make them want to seek me, make them know that I am here and alive, living God of Israel, right? Isaiah 29:15-16. Ha! You who hide a plan too deep for the Lord, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, who sees us? Who knows us? You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay? So this is the idea, it's speaking of God's omniscience, his omnipresence within every heart, within every person's consciousness. So you can't hide anything from God. I can hide something from another human, but shall the potter, God, be regarded as a clay? Normal, everyday humans. The potter, God, is omniscient. We clay humans, so to speak. Adam means red soil, red rock, which is symbolic of humanity, Adam. So we know that we're limited, that our consciousness isn't infinite. God's consciousness is infinite and imbued with omniscience and omnipresence and omnipotence. Do we think that God doesn't know our every thought, our every intention? You can't hide something from that being which created you, that being which emanated you, however you think of it or believe it to be. So we can't hide anything from God. We should come to God asking for help. We shouldn't try to hide our negativities from God. God's heart melts whenever we come to him and say, I need your help. I can't do this by myself. I'm really trying to grow spiritually, but I have this thing that I just can't get over. Only with your help can I get over it. Please help me. We have to pray like this over and over without ceasing. And we have to try. We have to try to turn around our lives in the ways that we know internally we need to, so that we can make ourselves glow in the way of God. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of darkness here. But again, this kind of refers to here, up to this point, I believe, unless I'm forgetting something from prior chapters. Isaiah is a very expansive scroll. Up to this point, we've only heard about people that are going to be condemned, essentially. Those people that aren't following Torah, that are going to be let to be destroyed by foreign military or by crisis. We've heard all this dark stuff. And then we hear about the holy remnant, those people that are faithful to God, that will be restored. They'll be part of the restoration of Israel, both politically and religiously. But here in Isaiah 29:18-21, there is a light of hope that some of those beings that have turned away from God will be brought back into the fold. They'll be forgiven and accepted back in. So let's see here what Isaiah says, because this is a different flavor. It's showing that God has a merciful side, that God has a warm spot in his heart for even people that aren't doing the way of God. And as far as I can remember up to this point, Isaiah has not shown this compassionate part of God. He's only shown this destroyer, God of war, this God of war that even turns on his own people that don't follow his way. And here we see that at least some of those people that have turned away from God will make a return to God. They'll make a teshuvah, that they will be convinced to come back into the fold. Isaiah 29:18-21. The deaf shall hear the words of a scroll, and out of their gloom and darkness the eyes of the blind shall see. The meek shall obtain fresh joy in the Lord, and the neediest people shall exult in the Holy One of Israel. For the tyrant shall be no more, and the scoffer shall cease to be. All those alert to do evil shall be cut off. Those who cause a person to lose a lawsuit, who set a trap for the arbiter in the gate, and without grounds deny justice to the one in the right. And those who err in spirit will come to understanding, and those who grumble will accept instruction. So here we see the idea of the deaf, that they shall hear the words of a scroll. The Hebrew Testament, there are a whole bunch of scrolls, right? That they'd roll out in the synagogues and in the temple to read to the people. So, and people that humble themselves, the meek are humble people, people that humble themselves before the Lord. At one point, they turned away from God for whatever reason, but now they're humble and they're making a return. They're making a teshuvah, the way of God. They shall obtain fresh joy in the Lord. And the neediest people shall exalt the Holy One of Israel. The neediest people are those that have turned away from God in Isaiah's perspective. For the tyrant shall be no more. In some future space here, in this restoration of Israel, which is political and religious, Isaiah is predicting that the tyrant shall be no more. The Israel shall have its own sovereignty, its own power, with a Davidic Messiah that will restore Israel politically and religiously. And all unfair legal practices will cease to be. I'm not sure that Israel to this day has not been offended by tyrants around them. So it hasn't come to pass yet. And I'm quite sure that somewhere in Israel, lawsuits are still going the wrong direction. But a prophecies for the future, right? But I really do like Isaiah 29:24. And those who err in spirit will come to understanding. Those who turn away from God, they can come to a new understanding of the value of the teachings of the Hebrew Testament. And those who grumble will accept instruction. Those who speak against religion in general will find that there are essential spiritual principles embedded in the Hebrew Testament that, yes, everyone should follow. And there are human parts. Let's be real. The Bible, whether you want to talk about the Hebrew Testament or the Christian Testament, it was not written by God. It was written by people that had differing levels of spiritual receptivity. And I'm going to tell you, this might bring up some ire in comments now or in the future. Jesus was much more evolved in his understanding of God and people than Isaiah was. But they also lived in two different times. There are a lot of man-made rules in the Hebrew Testament, and that is what Jesus spoke against when he spoke against the Pharisees and the Sadducees, saying in particular of the Pharisees that you go by the letter of the word instead of the heart. The heart is the core of the Hebrew Testament. The heart is the essential spiritual principles that you can find in every religion. And the peel, that you have to peel away to get to the fruit of the essential spiritual principles. That's all the other stuff that was made up along the way. Again, the Bible, the Hebrew Testament, the Christian Testament, it was not written by God. It was written by men inspired to speak about God in the way that they understood God, or the way that they felt God was speaking through them. Our job as modern day disciples is to separate the wheat from the chaff. And that is what we attempt to do as we go through the book of Isaiah. Let's have the second cup of blessing. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother of the Universe, beloved Abba, Yahweh, Adonai, El, Elohim, by all of your names, we open our heart to you. We welcome you with love, not with fear. Help us to live the essential spiritual principles within the Hebrew Testament and the Christian Testament. May we be a light unto the world. May they know from whom we've come from and who we represent. Not a wrathful God, made up for a time and a place, but of loving, pure consciousness that is deeply personal. May we seek to become one with you in divine communion. Amen, amen, amen. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I'm wishing you a good Shabbat and a great weekend. And I look forward to seeing you on Sunday for the Liturgy of the Chalice, Eucharist, or next Friday for Shabbat. Good Shabbat. Thank you. Good night.